Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Have you ever woken up one morning, sat at the edge of your bed, and realized it's been a very long time since you did something just for yourself? Not for your children, not for your spouse, not because the house needed cleaning or the bills needed paying, but simply because you needed care, because you mattered. That quiet thought, that tiny whisper feeling, what about me, has a way of getting louder after 65. Especially when the house is still, when the phone doesn't ring as much, when your calendar, once packed with things to do and people to see, suddenly looks like a blank page, and then the silence asks the question you spent your whole life avoiding. Now that I have time, what do I do with it? That's what today's video is about, because rewarding yourself, refreshing your spirit, and finally turning that same love inward, it's not a luxury, it's not indulgence, it's healing. It's recovery. It's a quiet revolution that begins in small, daily ways. And I want to show you 5 of them. They're not flashy. They don't cost a thing. But they change everything. Let's begin with the first one. One that seems simple but is often the hardest. Rest without guilt. Jake, 68, was the kind of man who couldn't sit still. If I sat down without doing something, I felt like I was wasting time, he once admitted. After he retired, the schedule that had once ruled his days suddenly disappeared. No calls from coworkers, no deadlines, no urgent to-do lists, just long hours of nothing. At first, he thought he'd enjoy the freedom, but within days, a strange unease crept in, like a radio that had lost its signal. He felt disconnected, not just from work, but from purpose. And then the real question surfaced. If I'm not busy, who am I? One quiet morning, the sky overcast, Jake sat on the porch with a lukewarm cup of coffee in hand. He didn't reach for the newspaper. He didn't turn on the radio. He just sat. He watched the trees sway. He let the breeze move across his face. And he remembered the way Rose, his late wife, used to sit there too, humming along to Louis Armstrong on their old kitchen radio. That morning, he did nothing. And for the first time in weeks, he felt something, peace. He began to make space for that moment every day. A small ritual, just sitting, just breathing, just being. Not out of laziness, but out of self-compassion. Out of the deep understanding that his worth didn't vanish when the work ended. Research from Stanford University suggests that true rest isn't about doing less. It's about letting the brain consolidate, reset, and restore. During periods of quiet, your mind begins to sort unprocessed emotions and forgotten thoughts. It's not the absence of activity. It's the presence of healing. So the next time you find yourself thinking, I should be doing something, try asking instead, what if rest is exactly what I need to become myself again? Rest isn't laziness. It isn't indulgence. It's remembering that you're human, not a machine, not a checklist, not just someone who serves others. Carol, 70, from Arizona, used to think she could only rest when everything was done. But done never really came. Even after retiring, she filled her time with favors, errands, obligations. I didn't know how to stop, she said. I felt like if I wasn't useful, I was invisible. One evening, while sorting through old cookbooks, she found a page marked with her mother's handwriting, a lemon tea cake recipe she hadn't baked in years. That night, instead of folding laundry or replying to emails, she turned on some music, tied on an apron, and let herself remember. The smell of vanilla and citrus filled her small kitchen. And when she sat down with that warm slice and a cup of tea, she didn't feel guilty. She felt whole. It wasn't about the cake. It was about allowing joy to return in the simplest way. She had given so much to others for decades. That night, she gave something back to herself. And that's the first way to reward yourself after 65. Give yourself permission to rest, to do nothing, to remember, to simply be. Because healing begins in stillness. And when we stop moving long enough to listen, we might just hear the parts of ourselves we've forgotten asking to come home. So now I ask you, when was the last time you gave yourself permission without explanation? When we finally give ourselves permission to rest, something beautiful begins to stir beneath the silence. A whisper, a nudge, a flicker of light. It's the part of us that remembers joy. Not the big kind, but the small kind. The kind that used to live in quiet corners of our day. A song we loved. A color we wore. The way sunlight fell across the garden at 4 p.m. For many people after 65, those small joys get buried. Life becomes practical, focused, heavy, and somewhere along the way, we start to believe that pleasure, simple, personal pleasure, is something we no longer need. But what if reclaiming those joys is not a luxury, but a lifeline? Take Howard, 72, from Wisconsin. For most of his life, he worked in construction, early mornings, long hours, problem-solving nonstop. He was proud of that, but after retiring, he felt hollow. I had time, he said, but I didn't know what to do with it. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Howard came across an old sketch pad, yellowed pages, broken pencils, and in the back, a drawing of a cabin in the woods, signed with his name. He had forgotten that once in high school, he dreamed of being an illustrator. I sat on the floor and started sketching, he told me. It was terrible, he laughed, but something about it made me feel like myself again. It wasn't about talent. It wasn't about productivity. It was about reclaiming a part of himself that had been quietly waiting for decades. We often talk about purpose after retirement, but sometimes purpose is simply doing something that makes you smile, even if no one sees it, even if it leads nowhere. These small joys, when woven into your days, are not distractions. They're nourishment. They remind you that your life is not only about what you give, but what you feel. Rose, 69, from Vermont, used to play piano every Sunday afternoon. Her hands would glide across the keys like they belonged there. Chopin, the Beatles, even silly little jingles she made up for her grandkids. But after her husband passed away, the piano went quiet. She covered it with a lace cloth and told herself, it's just one more thing that belongs to the past. Weeks turned into months. The silence settled in. One day, her granddaughter Emma visited. "Grandma," she asked, "can I play your piano?" Rose nodded, unsure even of how it would make her feel. But as Emma's small fingers tapped out a clumsy version of Twinkle, Twinkle, something inside Rose unlocked. She sat down beside her, pressed a single note, then another, then a chord. Her hands remembered more than she thought they would. "I started laughing and cry at the same time," she said. "I hadn't touched that piano in 6 years, but it felt like no time had passed." Music, like scent, has a strange way of bypassing the thinking brain and going straight to the heart. It doesn't ask permission. It just returns. Neurologically, activities tied to joy, especially those you once loved, activate the brain's reward pathways, releasing dopamine and endorphins. These aren't just happy chemicals. They're stabilizers, soothers. They tell your nervous system, you're safe, you're seen, you're alive. When you engage in something pleasurable from your past, painting, planting, dancing in the kitchen, it's not about reliving your youth. It's about reconnecting with a part of you that has always been whole, even through loss, change, and aging. The key isn't performance. It's presence. So when Rose sat back down at her piano, she wasn't just making music. She was remembering joy as a living part of her, not a distant memory. There's something sacred about the small things we used to love. They may not have made us money. They may not have been useful, but they made us feel like ourselves. And when we return to them, even in a quiet, imperfect way, they remind us of something we desperately need to remember after 65, that we are still capable of wonder. That delight is not reserved for the young. That beauty, even in its simplest form, still belongs to us. Jake now walks every morning with a camera around his neck, snapping photos of dew on his neighbor's roses. Rose plays piano with the windows open again. Howard keeps a new sketch pad by his recliner. None of them needed anyone's permission, and neither do you. This, then, is the second way to reward yourself and refresh your spirit. Go back and pick up one joy you left behind. Not to master it, but to feel alive in it again. And if you're wondering which joy to start with, try this. What's one thing you did as a child, or a younger version of yourself, that made you lose track of time? The answer to that question might just be the way back to your spirit. Not every win comes with applause. In fact, some of the most meaningful victories in life happen in silence, unseen, uncelebrated, but deeply earned. Like getting out of bed on a day when your heart feels heavy. Like going for a walk when your knees ache, but your spirit says, just 5 minutes. Like saying no when you used to say yes out of guilt. Or even just remembering to drink water, stretch, and be kind to yourself after years of putting everyone else first. These are not small things. These are brave things. But the world doesn't always see them that way. After 65, people sometimes stop noticing your efforts. The cheers get quieter. The milestones feel farther apart. And without realizing it, we stop acknowledging ourselves, too. That's where the damage begins, not in forgetting tasks, but in forgetting our worth. Let me tell you about Teresa, 74, from Oregon. She spent her whole life organizing, raising 4 kids, running a family business, being the go-to person for everyone's chaos. But after her husband passed and the kids moved out, her life grew still. I didn't know what to do with a day that didn't ask anything of me, she said. I thought if no one needed me, then I wasn't doing anything that mattered. Then one morning, she made a to-do list, not of chores, but of victories. Brushed my hair, took a walk to the mailbox, called my sister just to say hi, said something kind to myself in the mirror. By the end of the week, she had a notebook full of little triumphs, and something in her posture changed. I didn't feel like I was drifting anymore, she said. I felt like I was showing up for me. There's something deeply healing about saying, that was hard, and I did it anyway. For Teresa, the notebook became more than just a list. It became a mirror, a way to reflect back her courage, her discipline, her quiet commitment to keep living. Even when no one else was watching, what started as a small act of structure turned into a ritual of self-respect. Each check mark was a whisper to herself. I'm still here. I still matter. Too often, we think only big accomplishments deserve celebration. Graduations, promotions, anniversaries. But after 65, life shifts. Your wins may look different, but that doesn't make them smaller. In fact, the smaller the act, the more powerful it can be, because it means you're choosing yourself in the moments no one else sees. Here's what science says. Acknowledging small successes releases dopamine, the brain's natural motivator. It builds momentum. It tells your nervous system, you're doing well. Keep going. That's why writing it down matters, or saying it out loud, or even just pausing to smile at yourself in the mirror and think, that was brave of me. Jake, for example, keeps a jar on his kitchen counter. Every night, he drops in a slip of paper with one thing he did well that day. It's not for anyone else to read, he says. It's just to remind myself that I'm still showing up. These rituals don't require much, just attention, intention, and a little kindness. Because when you start recognizing yourself, you stop waiting for the world to notice. And that is freedom. What counts as a win? Anything that moves you forward. Anything that reminds you that you are still growing, still learning, still reaching, even if it's just a tiny stretch. For some, that win is showing up to a doctor's appointment they've been avoiding. For others, it's making a meal from scratch, or going a whole afternoon without criticizing themselves, or finally saying, I need help, and meaning it. Every one of those things is a victory, and every victory deserves a moment, even just a breath to say, well done, me. That's not arrogance. That's dignity. When you begin to honor your small wins, something amazing happens. You stop measuring your life by what's missing. You start measuring it by what's moving, by what's healing, by what's still possible. And that creates a shift not just in how you see yourself, but in how you show up for the world. Because people who celebrate themselves, even quietly, carry a kind of light that others can feel. So if you're wondering how to start, try this. Tonight, before you sleep, whisper one sentence. I'm proud of myself for, and fill in the blank. It might surprise you how much beauty that one sentence can hold. There's a quiet kind of healing that happens when you sit beneath a tree and say nothing at all. No phone, no television, no one talking at you or needing something. Just you and the wind and the sun warming your face like an old friend who never forgot you. After 65, life slows down in a way that can feel unsettling. We're so used to schedules and responsibilities, and people pulling on our time. But when all of that fades, there's something else waiting. Something older than stress, older than ambition, stillness, presence, and the earth itself. Howard, 70, discovered this not at a retreat or a fancy resort, but in his backyard. I was just out there pulling weeds, he laughed. Not exactly a spiritual practice. But then he noticed something. When he was outside, even just tending to his tomato plants, he didn't feel as anxious. His thoughts slowed down. His breath got deeper. He wasn't thinking about the past or the future, just watering. He started going outside on purpose, sitting under the old oak tree, watching the squirrels, letting himself feel the ground under his feet. I realized I'd spent most of my life indoors, he said, and maybe that's why I always felt like something was missing. Being in nature isn't just poetic, it's biological. When we step outside, our nervous system responds. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. The part of the brain responsible for anxiety quiets down, and the sensory world, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of birdsong, becomes a kind of lullaby for the overworked mind. Howard didn't need a diagnosis to tell him that. He just knew, when I'm in the garden, I don't feel lonely. I feel alive. Carol, 73, used to be the kind of woman who color-coded her planner. Every appointment, every errand, every birthday, written down, checked off, and followed through. I like feeling in control, she said. It made me feel safe. But after her husband passed and her grown children moved across the country, the planner sat mostly blank. Days lost their shape. She tried filling them with TV, puzzles, even online courses, but nothing settled the restlessness in her chest. Until one morning, she stepped outside without her shoes. It was spring. The grass was cold and damp with dew. I don't even know why I did it, she said. But the second my feet touched the ground, I felt something shift. She sat down. No blanket. No agenda. Just her in the wide, open sky. I cried, she told me. Not because I was sad. Because I realized how long it had been since I let the world hold me. From that day on, she made it a habit. 20 minutes outside each morning, no matter the weather. Even in winter, she'd bundle up and sit on her porch with a hot cup of tea, letting the wind braid her hair into its own design. What Carol discovered, and what many studies now support, is a profound regulatory effect of nature on the aging brain. It grounds us in the present, activates the senses, reduces inflammation in the body, and enhances mental clarity. It's not magic. It's biological remembering. You belong to this earth. You always have. But we forget, especially in a world that values doing over being. Carol didn't go outside to do anything. She went to feel what she hadn't felt in years. Stillness that wasn't empty. Silence that wasn't lonely. Beauty that didn't ask anything of her. There's something profoundly humbling about sitting still while the world moves around you. The tree doesn't rush. The clouds don't apologize for drifting. The bird doesn't worry about being productive. It just sings. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson nature offers us after 65. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You just have to be. Jake once told me, when I sit on a maple tree in my yard, I remember how small I am, and it's the most peaceful feeling in the world. He didn't mean small in a belittling way. He meant it as a relief. A release from having to hold everything together all the time. Because for decades, many of us have carried others, children, partners, co-workers, responsibilities. And now, for the first time, we have space to exhale, to let the ground carry us for once. Reconnecting with nature doesn't require a mountain hike or a beachfront view. It can be as simple as sitting near a plant you love, touching the bark of a tree, feeling the sunlight warm your shoulders, listening to the crickets at dusk. These small connections send a message to your soul. You're still part of something. You still belong. So the next time the walls feel too quiet or the air feels heavy, or your heart aches for something you can't name, step outside. Let the wind speak. Let the ground steady you. Let the sky remind you that healing doesn't always happen in words. Sometimes it happens in a breeze, sometimes in the rustle of a leaf, and sometimes it happens just because you showed up and stayed long enough to notice. There's a kind of giving that feels warm, light, and full of meaning. And then there's the other kind, the kind that leaves you tired, invisible, and wondering, when is it my turn? After 65, many people carry the quiet belief that their worth still lies in how much they can do for others. They show up, they help, they give meals, time, energy, money, advice, even when no one asks them to, especially then. But here's the truth. You are allowed to love others without losing yourself in the process. Rose, 71, had always been the strong one in her family. When her daughter went through a divorce, she became full-time babysitter and emotional anchor. When her sister got sick, she drove to appointments, cooked meals, managed the paperwork. I didn't mind, she said. I just kept saying yes. Until one afternoon, while folding laundry, she suddenly felt dizzy and sat down on the floor, crying. Not from pain, she explained. From exhaustion. I didn't even know whose socks I was folding anymore. That moment broke something open. She realized she had been giving everything she had without ever pausing to refill. There's a term for this in psychology, compassion fatigue, when care becomes chronic and the line between helping and self-erasure blurs. And while it often happens in caregiving professions, it also quietly happens in families, especially for women over 60. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that love means sacrifice, that real care requires self-forgetting. But that's not love. That's depletion. And here's the healing shift. True, giving nourishes both the giver and the receiver. After that day on the laundry room floor, Rose did something she hadn't done in years. She took a week off, not to travel, not to care for someone, not to run errands, but to rest. She sat by the window and read a novel she started 5 years ago but never finished. She drank tea slowly. She let the phone ring. And sometimes she didn't answer. And she journaled, writing down a simple but powerful question. What do I need right now to feel whole? At first, the answers were small. A warm bath, fresh air, a full night's sleep. But slowly, her needs grew clearer. Time alone without guilt. Support she didn't have to earn. Love that flowed both ways. She realized that her giving had become one-sided. Not because others demanded it, but because she had forgotten how to receive. So she started practicing. She said no to watching the kids 3 days in a row and said yes to inviting her friend for a slow breakfast on the porch. She said no to late-night phone calls about drama she couldn't fix, and yes to quiet evenings with a puzzle and music. It wasn't easy. The first time she turned down a favor, she felt guilty, like she was letting people down. But then something unexpected happened. Her daughter said, "Mom, thank you for finally taking care of yourself. I want you to be okay, too." It turns out, people don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to be present. And we can only be truly present when we're not running on empty. Science supports this. Research on emotional resilience shows that people who set healthy boundaries actually give more effectively, with less burnout, more empathy, and longer-lasting energy. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges. They teach others how to love you, while also showing you how to love yourself. There's a quiet kind of courage in choosing yourself, especially when you spent most of your life choosing everyone else first. For Rose, the biggest shift wasn't in what she said no to. It was in what she allowed herself to say yes to slowing down, yes to not answering every text, yes to put her feet up while someone else cooked for once, yes to receiving, not out of entitlement, but out of balance. Because true love doesn't require your exhaustion. True generosity includes you. And here's the beautiful part. The more Rose cared for herself, the more sincerely she could care for others. Her laughter came back. Her patience deepened. She wasn't giving from fumes anymore. She was giving from fullness. That's the kind of love that lasts, that nourishes, that heals. So if you're still measuring your value by how much you do for others, let me offer you this truth. You have already given enough to earn the right to rest. You have already loved enough to be loved in return. You have already proven your worth. Let your giving be gentle now. Let your care include your name. 2. This, then, is the fifth way to reward yourself after 65. Give, but not to the point of disappearance. Love, but not to the edge of self-forgetting. Be generous. And remember that you're allowed to keep some of that generosity for yourself. Not every ritual is grand. Not every ceremony needs candles or music or fanfare. Sometimes the most powerful rituals are quiet, small, known only to you. A cup of tea sipped slowly as the sun rises. A whispered prayer before bed. Brushing your hair while looking gently at yourself in the mirror, not to critique, but to say, "Hi, I see you." After 65, time begins to feel different. Mornings stretch longer. Evenings fall softer. The hours, once jammed with obligation, open up like blank pages. And the question quietly arises, how do I want to fill this space? For many, the answer becomes a ritual, something done not out of duty, but out of devotion. Jake, 67, wakes up every day and writes one sentence in his notebook. Just one. It could be a memory, a dream, a funny thing the dog did, or a feeling he doesn't fully understand yet. I do it before checking the news, he says. It's my way of touching base with myself before the world barges in. He didn't always write. In fact, he never considered himself a journal person. But after losing his brother, he found himself needing a place to speak. Not to anyone else, but to his own heart. That single sentence every morning became a ritual, a rhythm, a grounding point in a day that otherwise felt uncertain. Rituals are not routines. Routines are tasks. Rituals are sacred. They carry intention, meaning, a sense of I'm here and this moment matters. And the most beautiful part? They don't need to impress anyone. They just need to nourish you. Teresa, 75, never thought of herself as spiritual. She didn't meditate or light incense or read poetry. She liked her garden, her crossword puzzles, and a good grilled cheese sandwich on Sunday. But after her hip surgery, she couldn't garden like before. The silence in the afternoons became heavy. Her body healed slower than expected, and her mood dimmed. One evening, while clearing out a drawer, she found an old bottle of lavender oil someone had gifted her years ago. She dabbed a little behind her ears before bed, not because she believed it would fix anything, but because it felt nice. That night, her sleep was deeper. The next night, she did it again. Then she added soft music, an old CD of Nat King Cole, then a warm towel to wrap her feet in, then 5 deep breaths. What started as a passing moment became a ritual, her bedtime sanctuary, her quiet claim on the last 5 minutes of the day. I don't know if it's the oil or the music or the towel, she smiled, but something in that little routine reminds me I'm worth taking care of. She didn't do it for anyone else. No one clapped. No one noticed. But she noticed. And that's what rituals do. They gently say, you are not forgotten, not by yourself. Studies on brain health in older adults show that intentional daily rituals can have a profound impact on emotional stability, sleep quality, and even memory retention. Why? Because they anchor us. They turn scattered time into sacred space. These small practices, brushing your favorite mug before coffee, watering the same flower each morning, lighting a candle at dusk, signal to the brain that something meaningful is happening. And in a world that often tells us we're slowing down, a ritual tells us something much deeper. You are still alive, and that still means something. You don't need a reason to create a ritual. You just need a moment you choose, again and again, to come back to yourself. It could be lighting a candle and saying one thing you're grateful for. It could be the way you place your slippers by the bed each night, ready for morning. It could be your afternoon walk to the same bench under the same tree, where you sit and listen to the birds without rushing them, or yourself. These little things may seem insignificant, but they carry huge meaning. Because every time you do something intentionally, not for productivity, not for praise, but for presence, you reclaim a bit of your wholeness. You remind your nervous system, this moment is safe. I am safe. I belong. And that's what healing looks like. Not grand breakthroughs, not dramatic life changes, but 100 small returns to yourself each week, to your breath, to your rhythm, to your right to feel peace, even if it's just for 5 minutes with your hands wrapped around a warm mug. So tonight, maybe you light a candle just for you. Or tomorrow, you write a sentence in a notebook. Or you start your day with a soft smile in the mirror that says, I'm still here. And that matters because it does. This, then, is the sixth way to reward yourself after 65. Make space for a small moment that belongs only to you. Not for anyone else, not for achievement, just for love. Somewhere along the way, we're told to grow up and be serious. We trade in our crayons for calendars, our hide and seek for to-do lists. And eventually, the laughter we once felt deep in our bellies becomes a distant echo. But here's the secret no one tells you. Play never stops being important. We just stop giving ourselves permission. After 65, when work slows and roles shift, there's a quiet space that opens up, a space many people rush to fill with tasks, responsibilities, or distractions. But what if, just once, you fill that space with something wildly unproductive and incredibly joyful? Jake, now 70, hadn't picked up a paintbrush in over 40 years. I used to paint monsters and spaceships when I was a kid, he chuckled. Then I got a job, had a family, and forgot how to be silly. Then, at a local library's Art for Grown-Ups class, he picked up a brush again. No rules, no grading, just colors and paper, and laughter that made his shoulders drop. It was messy. It was ridiculous. It was perfect, he said. I went home with paint on my elbows and felt 10 years younger. That's the power of play. It reconnects us with our imagination, the part of us that dreams, experiments, explores. And that part doesn't age. It only waits. Psychologists have found that play in older adults stimulates cognitive flexibility, reduces stress, and improves emotional regulation. More than that, it revives a sense of aliveness that no vitamin or checklist can provide. Play doesn't need to be productive. It just needs to be pleasurable. And that's what makes it sacred. Rose, 68, used to roll her eyes when someone mentioned adult coloring books. I'm not 5, she'd say with a smirk. But inside, she missed something she couldn't quite name. A looseness, a sparkle, a silliness that had slowly faded over the years. One day at the community center, she tagged along with a friend to what she thought was a flower arranging class. Turned out, it was a game afternoon, a table full of dominoes, cards, Jenga blocks, and a group of seniors laughing so hard someone snorted soda through their nose. I thought about walking out, she admitted. But then someone handed me a card and said, "You're on my team." 2 hours later, Rose was in tears, not from sadness, but from laughing harder than she had in years. I didn't realize how long it had been since I played, she said. Not competed, not achieved, just played. That experience awakened something in her, joy without purpose, laughter without a lesson. And from that day forward, she started setting aside playtime every week. Sometimes it was dancing alone in the kitchen. Sometimes it was singing karaoke with friends. Sometimes it was building Lego castles with her grandson and pretending they were royalty defending a plastic fortress. Whatever the form, the message was the same. You're still allowed to have fun. In fact, your brain craves it. Neurologists confirm that laughter and play stimulate multiple areas of the brain: motor function, language memory, and, most importantly, reward systems that release serotonin and endorphins. These chemicals do more than just lift your mood. They boost immunity, reduce inflammation, increase your sense of social connection. They make you feel human again, not just useful, but joyful. So when someone tells you, grow up, maybe the most rebellious, beautiful thing you can say back is, no thanks, I'm busy having fun. At this stage of life, joy doesn't need a reason. You don't need to deserve it. You don't need to earn it by working hard, being useful, or checking every box. Joy is a birthright. And one of the kindest things you can do for your spirit is to reclaim the kind of joy that has no agenda, no productivity, no lesson, no moral of the story. Just pure, silly, beautiful fun. Jake now plays card with a group of friends every Thursday. No bets, no points kept, just laughter and light insults over mismatched snacks. Rose joined a community improv group. We're terrible, she laughs, but no one cares. We're having the time of our lives. And Teresa, the woman who once color-coded her life, now spends one morning a week playing with clay, making small, strange figurines that live on her windowsill. They're ugly, she admits, but they make me smile. None of these things change the world, but they change them. They soften the edges, open the heart, brighten the day. And isn't that enough? So if it's been a while since you laughed just because, since you dance with no rhythm, since you let yourself be a beginner at something silly and wonderful, let this be your permission slip. Go play. Not because you should, but because you can. This, then, is the seventh way to reward yourself after 65. Let yourself have fun again. Unashamed, unhurried, unapologetic. Because joy, too, is a kind of wisdom you've spent decades giving to your family, your work, your community. You've loved hard, carried burdens, stayed up late, said yes when it cost you, and showed up even when you were exhausted. And maybe, somewhere along the way, you forgot what it felt like to be cared for, not by others, but by yourself. This series wasn't about adding more to your plate. It wasn't about productivity or reinvention or becoming someone new. It was about remembering that your spirit matters. That joy is still available. That healing doesn't have an expiration date. Maybe you've already started resting without guilt. Maybe you've picked up a forgotten joy, honored a small win, let nature hold you, or said no to protect your energy. Maybe you've started writing a sentence each morning or let yourself play again. Or maybe you're just beginning to believe that you're worthy of it. That's more than enough. Jake once said, I thought self-care was for people with time. Now I realize it's for people who want to live the time they have left. And maybe that's the quiet truth. Self-care isn't selfish. It's survival. It's sacred. It's your way home. So as we close this journey together, I want to leave you with one final invitation. Tonight, when the house is quiet and the lights are low, whisper this to yourself, out loud in a journal, or just silently in your heart. I've done enough. I've given enough. And now I choose to give to me. Because you matter, not for what you do, but for who you are. And if today's story touched you, even just one part, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's one way you're planning to reward yourself this week? And if this journey helped you feel a little more seen, a little more inspired, tap that like button and consider subscribing. It helps this channel grow, and it tells me to keep creating more stories just like this for you. Until next time, be kind to yourself. You've earned it, and you are so deeply worth it.